Hello, dear students. Welcome back to a news channel. Today we have why commons matter, how community is key to their well-being. Students, what is commons? Students, this concept of common, it refers to shared resources. Okay? Shared resources that everyone can use but which no one owns individually, such as air, water, forest, and public park. So let's just understand this concept with help of a story. Okay, स्टोरी की हेल्प से ये कंसेप्ट समझते हैं कि आखिरकार कॉमन्स किसे हम रेफर करते हैं. So in a peaceful village there was a large pond that everyone in the village used. And this pond provided fresh water for drinking, farming, and washing. Now, this pond can be considered as a common resource, meaning no one owned it, but everyone could access it. One year, the crops weren't growing as well, and some villagers thought that if they used more water from the pond, their fields would do better, right? So what they started, uh, they uh, they started to draw extra water for their farms. Seeing this, others in the village did the same, thinking they would also need more water to keep up. Soon, what happened? The pond started to dry up, and the fish disappeared. The water quality worsened, and there wasn't enough water for everyone's crop. It this and this made the village, uh, you know, this was whole a troublesome situation for villagers, and they, because they had been so much focused on taking more, that they hadn't thought about protecting the pond, right? So the story shows how commons like the village pond can be ruined if people focus only on individual benefit without considering the collective impact. So everyone has to work together to protect and sustainably use common resources for the benefit of all. Right? So why we are discussing common? Recently, Delhi hosted the Commons Convening 2024. Okay, they hosted an event regarding commons. So this event focused on the significance of common resources such as community forest, pastures, and water bodies, which are very crucial for rural and tribal communities. And these commons not only provide essential resources like food, water, and firewood, but also offer ecosystem services like soil regeneration, water purification, and they contribute to livelihood, cultural identity, and even the stability of environment, especially when we are facing climate change worldwide, right? So this conference, which was this conference of which Delhi hosted, it brought together many important people such as policymakers, environmentalists, and even scholars to discuss how to better integrate local communities into the governance and how the protection of these common resources can be done, right? So if experts, they emphasize that empowering local community is key, in fact, to ensure sustainable management of commons, right? So commons, till now whatever we have discussed, it means refers to resources that are accessible, here it is written, that are accessible to all the members of society and are not owned by any one individual or entity. These resources include such as grazing lands, rivers, sacred sites, forest, local ponds, and even there are some example of global shared global areas like high seas, polar region, and outer space. So the governance of commons is crucial because without proper management, these shared resources are often overexploited and which will lead to environmental degradation and depletion, a concept known as the tragedy tragedy of commons. Okay, so this concept is known as the tragedy of commons, right? So how the governance of commons is done in India. See, India has a rich history of managing local commons, particularly in rural areas where community forests, grazing lands, even water bodies are vital for sustaining livelihoods. Right? So, governance of commons in India is managed at a multiple level, like the local through local communities, traditional systems such as gram sabhas and panchayat. They often play a critical role in managing resources. For instance, when we discussed an important act, Forest Forest Rights Act 2006, students, this is quite important. This act is very, very important. And like it is written here, that this act is considered to be a good template for managing common forest resources. तो ये क्या है? See, Forest Rights Act of 2016 is crucial in the context of commons governance in India. Right? The FRA recognizes the rights of tribal and other forest dwelling communities to forest resources on which their livelihoods depend. So, this legalization is significant for ensuring that local communities have a legal framework to manage and protect common resources like forest. So, what are the key features of Forest Rights Act 2016? Number one, the FRA, it acknowledges the individual and community rights of forest dwellers. Okay, both individual and community rights. इंडिविजुअल राइट्स भी रिकॉग्नाइज करता है, कम्युनिटी राइट्स भी रिकॉग्नाइज करता है, right? So it allows them to own, manage, and govern forest land. And this act, it also empowers Gram Sabha to manage forest, which helps conserve resources uh, and it you know it strengthens their participation of local communities. So, as per this act, forest dwellers cannot be evicted from their land unless their rights under FRA are fully settled. So, it ensures that commons such as forests are managed sustainably by the people who directly dependent on them, right? So, FRA is quite relevant when we talk about the commons because by prompting by promoting community participation in forest governance, this act also talks about the broader global discussion about commons where local governance and sustainability are critical for protecting shared resources, like we can see in the international frameworks like Antarctic Treaty and Outer Space Treaty, right? So uh, at the international level, here you can see there are some examples mentioned, like outer space, high seas, Paris Agreement on climate change, right? Because Paris Climate Agreement of 2015, it is international treaty, and it involves almost all countries which focus on reducing global carbon emission to mitigate climate change, right? And the atmosphere and climate are global commons, and managing these requires collective action to ensure the common goods of all nations, right? And we know that this agreement, it discuss the voluntary emission reduction targets for countries. So it promotes sustainable practices and highlights the need for cooperation in managing climate related commons. Right. Similarly, we have Outer Space Treaty. Outer Space Treaty. Right. Now, this outer space is another example of global common. Why? Because space can be accessed by all the countries, but it isn't owned by a single entity, right? So this outer space treaty, which was signed by over 100 countries, it established space as the province of all mankind, meaning it is not subject to one national entity, right? And treaty ensures that outer space can be used for peaceful purposes and so that it can benefit all humanity. It also forbids, this treaty also, forbids the placement of nuclear weapons in space. So basically, this treaty also emphasizes on shared governance and the need for international cooperation in outer space. So that is how global commons are governed. And similarly, if we see the example of polar regions, जैसे Arctic है, Antarctic है, so Arctic is also one of the world's largest commons, and it is shared by multiple nations, including US, Canada, Russia, and Scandinavian countries. And Antarctica is also South Pole में Antarctica है, it is also governed by Antarctic Treaty, which establishes Antarctica as a zone of peace. Okay, अंटार्कटिका को एज अ जोन ऑफ पीस डिक्लेयर किया गया है ओनली फॉर साइंटिफिक इंक्वायरी, तभी तो वहां पे मिलिट्री एक्टिविटी मना है, राइट? तो ये भी अंटार्कटिक ट्रीटी को भी बहुत सारी कंट्रीज ने साइन किए। मेन समझना हमें ये है कि जो ग्लोबल कॉमन है उनको सारी कंट्रीज मिलके यूज करती है, एक्सेस करती है, लेकिन किसी भी एक कंट्री की मोनोपोली नहीं होती है, राइट? तो उसके कंजर्वेशन के लिए, प्रोटेक्शन के लिए भी सभी कंट्रीज को मिलजुल के काम करना पड़ता है। बट देर आर सम चैलेंजेस इन गवर्निंग कॉमन्स, राइट? कुछ चैलेंजेस भी है। चैलेंजेस कैसे? सबसे नंबर वन चैलेंज जो कि है वो है ओवर एक्सप्लॉइटेशन। ओके, over exploitation. See, students, without strong governance, commons are vulnerable to overuse. For instance, we see the high seas, right? Oceans, they suffer from over fishing and pollution because no single entity has full control, and international agreements like UNCLOs, uh, they are sometimes difficult to enforce. And we have also seen in the case of governance for common global common like the Arctic and Antarctic, economic interest, it often comes in conflict with conservation goals. So this makes the whole governance difficult. Like sometimes when we talk about the conservation of Arctic, countries which are surrounding the Arctic region, so they often want to explore Arctic for their economic interest like exploration, mining. पर इस चक्कर में कभी कभी कंजर्वेशन जो गोल है वो साइडलाइन हो जाते हैं, राइट। तो इस कॉन्फ्लिक्टिंग इंटरेस्ट से भी कंजर्वेशन जो है आप ग्लोबल कॉमन्स का, वो डिफिकल्ट हो जाता है। एंड we are also seeing the climate change. It affects all global commons. For example, the melting ice in the Arctic, it opens new shipping routes and access to resources. So it also increases international competition. And this calls for stronger governance framework to manage these changes in a substantial manner, right? So commons, whether local or global, it require robust governance so that they are managed sustainably and equitably, right? In India, local communities play a key role in managing natural resources, while internationally treaties like Antarctic Treaty and the Paris Climate Treatment, it demonstrate how collective action can protect global commons. However, students, these frameworks face challenges, particularly from economic pressures and environmental degradation. So it requires ongoing cooperation, and it also needs, some innovation in governance of these common resources. All right, students. So that's it for today. Have a happy learning. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.